Yay, we are here. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Christine from Two Rivers, and tonight we have Elle Marr and her new book, The Lies We Bury, and she's in conversation with Georgina Cross, whose book is The Stepdaughter. First, I'm going to do a little PSA, and then Elle is going to read a little bit from her book, and Georgina will ask her questions. Two Rivers is also a yarn shop, so we have a weekly Stitch and Bitch. Currently, we're wrapping up our Two Rivers poetry contest for our local students. We also have a book fair online right now. We are starting a new YA for Grown-Ups book club, and we have another event on April 18th for a book called When I Ran Away. And then April 24th is my favorite day of the year. It is Independent Bookstore Day. So if you have a chance to support an independent bookstore online, or if they have open for shopping, that would be great. I do want to say, Elle, and I don't want to embarrass you, but Kirkus gave Elle's book a starred review.
Oh.
And here's the quote. A deep, deep dive into unspeakable memories and their unimaginable, shocking legacy. Like that's pretty darn good.
Yay!
Pretty amazing. So yeah, do you want to start? Give us a little taste.
Yes, thank you so much, Christine and Two Rivers Books. I am thrilled to be hosted by you tonight, and definitely to be accompanied by the brilliant Georgina Cross, who is also a best-selling suspense author. Thank you so much for being here, Georgina.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you asked me, Elle. Thank you.
Yay. It is, absolutely a privilege to be here with the both of you. So thank you. And then thanks to everyone who has joined this evening. Really excited to be here, to be celebrating the launch it's been a week since Lies We Bury launched, but I've been celebrating, as you can see. And I am just thrilled to be here, to be celebrating with all of you.
Show us the big cover behind you.
That's the big cover.
There's the big cover.
It's so pretty.
Oh, there we go.
Pretty. It's really awesome.
Thank you for that. You guys this is not your first crowdcast. Yeah. So there it is, courtesy of my my amazing publisher, Thomas and Mercer, and my publicist, Brittany. She was so generous and helpful to send this over. So now I get to have this forever, which I'm very, very happy about. So I am going to be reading from the very first page of Lies We Bury. I had not planned on it, but I guess decided to, thanks to friendly pressure and a little bit of celebratory wine Thursday evening, this launch event. So here we are. So for those of you that have a copy, you might follow along, or you can just listen to me. I wasn't going to read from my book because I thought people will read it themselves, but then the fact was brought up to me that it might be interesting to hear from the author reading from her story in the way that she heard it in her head. So here we go. This is how I hear it in my head. Secrets never stay buried for long. Photography won't allow it, for one thing. The shutter of a camera captures moments that would have otherwise gone unseen, like that photo of a lone Jewish woman staving off the Israeli army before they nearly trample her. Or that shot of a man jumping, falling from the World Trade Center. If a camera snaps long enough and in the right location, anything can be unearthed, documented, and preserved for all time. In my case, I needed only 7 years before I came to light. Images of me trembling in a torn blanket and 2 small shoes were plastered across newspapers, then the internet, hair washed but matted because I had just woken up, eyes wild like the feral animals so many compared us to in the headlines afterward. I had been born in captivity, unbeknownst to our neighbors who, in interviews, said we had the nicest lawn on the street. Secrets have a way of breaking free, but when they do, their shame lingers like the smell of rotten meat sauce, even some 20 years later.
So good. So good. I love it. Thank you, Elle.
Good. Yes.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you for
So
indulging me.
we asked Elle to read, and she didn't want to, but that was, I mean, you can tell by the first paragraphs of any book, right? Like that's what sucks you in. And Elle, your writing is just so wonderful. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for suggesting it.
Yay. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us tonight. As we were introduced earlier, I'm Georgina Cross, and as you know, Elle Marr. Elle, I wanted to talk about how we met, because I thought that might be kind of fun for everybody to know how we even came together. So she and I are part of a Facebook debut authors group. They have one for every single year that you have a book coming out. And she and I met virtually through Facebook, I guess 8-9 months ago, and just started commenting, right? Like we started commenting on each other's stuff and on other authors' posts. And then somewhere along the way, we made the connection that we were both half Chinese.
Yeah.
And then
exactly it.
We were like, oh, now we're like sisters.
Exactly.
And so we've just been talking and chatting and messaging ever since, which has been really cool. And it's been neat to watch your author journey, especially now that you've got your second book already.
Yeah, I was going to say it has been wonderful to follow each other's journeys, especially from afar, since no one is really meeting face to face still. But you are over in Alabama and I am in Oregon, so it's so fun that everyone's so much more comfortable with just virtual face to face meetings now, and we can do this. And especially fun watching your debut, The Stepdaughter, come out last fall, which was a huge hit. And then watching your second book, The Missing Woman, come out in January, which I have.
Oh, you're sweet.
Right
both
here.
books came out in the pandemic because I know how to time it really well.
I was going to say, you also have 2 books out during the pandemic, as I have, and holy cow, it's a unique, elite sisterhood, and we have to stick together.
Yeah. So it's been a really cool friendship, Elle, and I'm honored that I'm even getting to talk to you tonight. So before we can tune you on, I just want to remind everybody, and we've been putting in the promotion, if you want to go ahead and pop in a comment, that's wonderful. We love seeing who's all here. But also, if you could click at the bottom, it says ask a question, and we'd love to answer your questions here. We'll pose them to Elle, see what she has to say. We've got 6 questions already teed up, so we'll get to those in a few minutes. But whenever you ask a question, Elle later on, she will do some secret magical random selection of a winner. And what does the winner get, Elle?
A signed copy of Lies We Bury.
Super cool. Super cool.
And probably some other things in there.
Awesome. Okay, well, so everybody's, I see more comments coming through and some more questions coming through. So this is great. We love having you all here. So Elle, you've had a huge last couple of weeks. I mean, the reviews that are coming in, we already heard about the Kirkus review. Wow. I mean, that is amazing to have that starred review. Publishers Weekly, this is another huge shout out. They call you Elle Marr is an author to watch. And that's pretty big deal from Publishers Weekly. How did you feel when you heard that one?
Well, both of them, I think I was just in shock. I was very pleased and flattered and just honored. I mean, as a new author, you hope that the trade publications will review you and like your book. And I never expected such high praise so early. So I'm extremely grateful and glad, very glad for it.
Well deserved. I mean, like I said, and we talked earlier before we came online, I was like, please read the first few chapters of Lies We Bury. And I had the same reaction when I read The Missing Sister last year too. You're just such a smart writer. Your use of adjectives, adverbs, your language, it's so intelligent, smart are the words I want to describe your writing style. Your subject matter as well is very serious and suspenseful and sometimes quite scary, which is great because that's completely my alley. But yeah, it's so clever. So I'm glad you got to read that. So hopefully everyone who's logged in has read the book or is about to read Lies We Bury, because it is officially out. It's been a week?
A week. It's been a week. Thank you for saying all that. That's so kind. Yeah, I've just been floored by the response definitely over the last month, and the trade reviews and then the reviews themselves. They say authors should never look at reviews because they're not written for authors, they're written for other readers. But I will filter my reviews and only look at the nice ones. So the 5-star reviews have been very generous.
Yeah,
I can't speak to the rest.
I'm the same with reviews too. It's gotten to the point where I'll read them, and you develop such a thick skin, don't you, as an author?
You must,
really
yeah.
Have to. Like, I think the first book, you really kind of have to just swallow it down. And so now I'll read a review and just go, that was their opinion.
Yeah.
And
It just wasn't for them. Exactly.
But you're not having that problem. So the 5 stars keep coming in for all of your books.
Well, I've been very fortunate and grateful that the right readers have found my book. So it's been a fun whirlwind.
So, okay. So book 2, how have you been celebrating? What have you been doing the last 2 weeks?
I've been doing a lot of press, which has been so much fun. It's been so much fun and such a privilege to be able to speak with different media outlets and connect with different readers across different parts of the country, really. When The Missing Sister came out, my debut, it was literally a year ago to the day, April 1st, 2020. And as everyone will recall, we were all very flabbergasted, I think, and confused and just upset that we couldn't go and do our daily activities. So at the very bottom of everyone's list was, how do I navigate a virtual launch event, or how do I navigate a virtual interview? No one really had the expertise that we do now. So the press that I've been doing these last couple of weeks has been really incredible. Like, the experience that I thought publishing a novel would be last year, that it wasn't. So it's fun to kind of have the experience so soon afterward.
Yeah. Well, you've been busy. I mean, every single day Elle's doing this interview here. You've had a podcast there. I think you did a Facebook Live, or you did a takeover for somebody's Facebook account a couple days ago.
Facebook Live with the Mighty Blaze. It's been fun. It's been so much fun. And then I did a live interview on local ABC affiliate Cat2 Portland TV channel here, which was amazing to do, especially because I watched that program frequently. So there have been a lot of fun experiences the last couple of weeks. It's definitely, it's required some coffee while I'm also writing my 3rd book, but I'm grateful and couldn't imagine any other way.
Yeah, and we're definitely gonna get to that 3rd book later, because I know there's a couple of questions in here already asking about your follow-up book. So
that's nice, thank you.
Yeah, I'm thinking these people have read your first 2 and they're already eager for the next one. So, get to work, Elle, do these live That's
the plan. Yes, good call.
All right, so on a personal note, what have you been doing to celebrate?
It's really been press. It's been press. It's been very busy. It's been very busy because I'm still writing my 3rd book and I'm on deadline for that. So to celebrate, though, I had a massive sushi dinner with my husband, consumed copious amounts of champagne.
Nice.
And have just been hugging my 1-year-old son, because my 2nd book is dedicated to him. And really just trying to sit in the moment and enjoy every interview, enjoy every podcast or appearance or Q&A that's published online. Just moments like this, really trying to be present, because in exciting moments and milestone moments, we all too often are just trying to make it through and remembering X, Y, and Z along the way. And I'm trying to really enjoy this moment.
Right. Good. Well,
I'm celebrating.
Yeah, well deserved. I'm glad you had the champagne and the sushi. That sounds amazing. That sounds perfect. All right, so on to Lies We Bury. For everybody who doesn't know or hasn't read the book, can you describe what this is all about?
Yes, great question. Lies We Bury is set in Portland, Oregon, and it follows my main character, Marissa Moe, 2 decades after she escaped the basement prison where she was born. She is trying to move past this trauma to build a life for herself as a news photographer in Portland, when someone begins goading her with clues from her past and leaving items from her childhood at crime scenes. And as the bodies pile up and more signs point to Marissa as the killer, she must dig into these long buried memories to determine who is behind these murders. So that's the basic gist. That's the elevator pitch. I hope that that's intriguing to some of you who haven't read Lies We Bury. But I really enjoyed writing this book. I wrote this book so quickly. I wrote this book in about 3.5 months of first draft. 3.5 months, which was extremely fast for me, considering The Missing Sister took me 3 years. And so I then edited it with my editor in 2 months that followed. And so really I wrote it and edited it in about 6 months. So it's, I was so passionate about this story that I felt like it just flowed, which doesn't always happen in writing. I don't know if you feel the same way, Georgina.
Yeah, I feel like that's what happens a lot of times between a first book and a second book too, to touch on what you said earlier. It's that first book before you get that contract, right? And you've had so much time to tweak it and over tweak it, tweak it to death, and then the editor tweaks, right? And then the second book, it flowed out of you, but was it also part of having a contract over your head, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. You know, that's exactly it. You have several book contracts right now. Yeah. That's exactly it. Deadlines are really, I mean, writers talk about they are meanderers or they're, pantsers. They just go with wherever their story takes them. And I think once you get under contract, it causes you to really rein that in. And I say that with love because I used to be a pantser, but I can't now.
Right. You got the due date. Still, 3.5 months is super impressive.
It was very fast, but it was, like I said, it just kind of flowed. I'm grateful for that because I was worried about the sophomore follow-up. Like there's a lot of pressure once your first book is out. For me, it was self-imposed. My publisher was 100% supportive. So it was a whirlwind writing it, but I'm happy with how it turned out. It's really fun to see it in readers' hands now.
Yeah. Because talking about that pressure, I mean, there is, isn't there? There's something about that second book. Because Missing Sister, I mean, that was your debut, huge sales. You were on all these different lists for #1 in this category, #1 in that category. I mean, you just, as a debut author, it's like the dream, right? And so congrats to you for that. How did that affect you, or did it not affect you when it came to writing book 2?
That's a great question. I definitely felt expectations. I think, again, entirely my own. My publisher has been and continues to be super, super supportive, and just I feel very grateful and lucky that my publisher has been so, I guess, just supportive and believing in my work the entire time. But all that's to say, I definitely wanted to make Lies We Bury a good follow-up to Missing Sister, an appropriate follow-up, and then something that I could live with 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. It's a wild and exciting thing to know that we now have this work, this creative body that will be here on this earth, long after we're gone, and that will stay with certain readers or people that were really touched by our work. Like it's a pretty wild feeling to stop and acknowledge that. Don't you think? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's there forever and endeavor.
Endeavor. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing, Georgina?
I think it's an amazing thing, until as an author, and you're probably the same way, if you read it again, and that's actually a question I want to ask you too, but if you read it again and you find something that you want to change, but you can't, right? And so I've heard this from other author friends, but have you, once your book has come out in print, have you been able to read it again from start to finish?
No, I haven't at the time, but I don't think I would. The Missing Sister, I spent, we had a solid 5 years together after editing was all said and done.
Isn't it so funny how that works? When somebody first told me that, I was like, what do you mean? I hadn't gotten a book contract yet. So I was like, what do you mean you didn't read your book? And she was like, oh no. I mean, I put it on the shelf, it was beautiful. We did all the marketing afterwards, but yeah, there's something that happens, right? It's like all the editing and then the line edits and the copy edits and the final pass pages. By the time that thing comes out into the world, you're already pretty much finished with the next book. So your brain is kind of moved on.
Absolutely.
You're the same way then.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. And also I would say a book is never perfect to me. It's not that the book is perfect and it's ready to be shown to the world or shown to my editor. It's that it's time. Mm-hmm. Deadline has hit, or I have spent as much time and energy on this as I'm willing. And so it's time to move on, to let it be what it is. And so going back and reading through my work, I don't think I would, maybe I will, maybe I'll feel differently. I mean, my book has just been published. The Missing Sisters has been published for a year. Lies We Bury just a week. Maybe next year. Yeah. I don't have any inclination at the moment. So
I think it's interesting, and hopefully the people that have tuned in will find that so interesting to hear that from authors, because I think that's a weird quirk that so many of us share, and I don't think people realize that once these things come out, we hardly touch them again. I've been in interviews where someone has asked me about a character, and I've had to stop and be like, which I can't remember exactly because we've already moved on to the next book. So it's hilarious. Anyway, so with Lies We Bury, Kimberly Bell, huge author, she's a big supporter, friend of ours, and
yes, I love her.
She's amazing, and she gave such an amazing blurb about your book, and then she retweeted our post the other day. So I was super happy for her to do that. But she described your book as room mashed up with a murder mystery. And when she said that, I was like, that is exactly, it hits, it's that, for those who aren't familiar with Room, the book that was eventually turned to a movie, that whole singular concept of being stuck in that room, right? The prisoner, similar to your storyline. Had you thought of Room before you wrote, or as you were doing your research, did that storyline come into play? What did you do to research for this book?
Yeah, all great questions. I first off was just floored when Kimberly Bell agreed to blurb, and that she had such nice things to say. It wasn't just like, oh, you should read this. This is a must read. It was a very detailed, very nice blurb. So I continue to be in awe of her and her writing. She's an amazing author herself. I did a lot of research for Lies We Bury. As I was doing research, I saw parallels to Room, the novel, because it's dealing with it's dovetailing with the same concept and the same content. But sadly, there are many more incidents and events to pull, information from around the world. That's what I found in my research. It's, frankly, just such a disturbing concept, the idea of false imprisonment. And then the idea that someone could be held captive for years on end and then be, forced to bear children, etc. It's just such a horrifying concept, and one that splashes across our headlines every so often, again, globally. But not too much is really, there's not a lot of emphasis on the survivors. And I really wanted to approach a novel from the perspective of the survivors and exploring their experience years on after the initial trauma, and whether or not they're able to move forward, or they choose not to. Maybe it's too scary to move forward. Sometimes moving forward is just waking up the next day, and that's all that they can manage, which is valid. I really was struck by the cases that I did research and books that I read. I read several survivors' stories memoirs that they then published years on after the fact. But I also think it's important to me to not be specific in these cases, because Lies We Bury is a work of fiction. It is not based on anyone's particular experience. And really the goal of it overall was just to highlight the survivors and the strength that those women generally have in each of these situations. That's the through line for me.
Yeah. I felt for Claire, and then we find out that she's covering up, right? And her name is Marissa. I really felt her as a character. I really was drawn to her and her vulnerability and what she was struggling with, and this past that she was coming from. It was just, it's one of those things where, it's so important for an author to be able to write a character that a reader can instantly feel something with, or some sort of sympathy or connection with. And then as the book progressed, it was just so clever because you had these flashbacks which showed the actual underground that they were being, kept captive in. And then we were able to kind of move into this really fun cat and mouse chase, right? Like I felt as I've read the book, I'm getting to know her. I'm getting to get to know her sisters that were held with her and born in captivity with her. But then you get into these chapters where I felt like I was trying to solve a riddle with every single location she was coming across. And, where did you get that clever idea from?
Well, first of all, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted. That was my aim. So thank you for that. I love puzzles, and I love, scavenger hunts. I think there are themes of that in The Missing Sister as well. Definitely. I love hidden languages. I love that there might be something more significant beneath the surface than what we initially see. And especially if, that ties back to something from childhood. Like I get chills just thinking about it. I think those are the most fun puzzles in the sense that as children, and I tried to employ this concept in the past chapters, as children, there's so much that goes on around us and we're not understanding of it. Like it's why the Toy Story movies initially were just such huge successes, because they were fun little tongues in cheek jokes that were much of the dialogue, and then Pixar really ran with that as well. There's so much that goes over kids' heads, and I really wanted to explore that in the past chapters, while, of course, the readers are adults and grasping the severity and the significance of their imprisonment. I didn't think that there was any way to really discuss to display and demonstrate the past events other than from a child's perspective. I didn't want it to be that book where the book was depicting, the assault and the violence from an adult perspective, which was all too conscious of all of those layers. I wanted it to be not manageable, but just, I didn't want that to be the sole focus, because again, it's informing the trauma of these adult survivors 20 years later, but it's not the focus of the book. That's what I aimed for, at least.
Yeah, because it definitely gave you this insight into what she experienced, and therefore we were able to understand a little bit more of where she was coming from later, especially with the job she was trying to hold down and the identity she was trying to keep hidden from everyone, and was successfully managing to keep it pretty hidden from most people. And so then it was just so clearer, I think, for us to be able to understand why she was saying the things she was saying, or the thoughts that were running through her head, because then the next chapter we were able to see an insight into what these girls were going through and with their mom. So I definitely want to get back to more of this, but I want to also jump over to some of the questions that have come in. So we've got something, yeah. So Paulette Kennedy, she's got a question for you. And I've been wondering this too. So both The Missing Sister and your latest book, Lies We Bury, are both suspense. We can call them thriller, suspense, psychological fiction. Have you always been a suspense writer? And Paulette wants to know, what drew you to the thriller suspense genres as an author?
Well, hi, Paulette. Thank you for joining. Let's see. I have always written suspense, but I haven't been writing novels that long. So it's a small pool to pull from. My first written novel was during NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. And it was a romantic suspense because I thought that's what I should write, because I thought that's what was popular in the market. And then I realized what I like most about this manuscript is the suspense. And so I just shelved it and then started writing actual suspense thrillers instead. And that's what became The Missing Sister. I have always been interested in psychological fiction, especially psychological thrillers. I think they're not the most, but I think they are very compelling, and that they often force you to just turn the page, and that's what I love. I love getting sucked into an experience, which is absolutely possible across genre. I read very widely across genre, but since I've been writing novels, it's been suspense thrillers. And then before then, it was really like chapters in my journal as an 8-year-old. So I don't know what genre that was.
We should look back at those and see if there were some elements of suspense in there, because you write these really cleverly thought out storylines, and where there are threads that impact from chapter to chapter. So I can just imagine Elle writing as a kid and what you were writing about back then. We need to dig some of these up.
I was going to say, I live in fear of them actually existing somewhere. I don't know if they actually are in a box, but I also live in fear of the internet being scraped and someone discovering what actually was my first like published work. I have spoken about this a little bit publicly, but I, as like a 9-year-old, sneaked into a writing forum for adults on the pre-AOL platform Prodigy. Do you remember Prodigy?
No.
It's ancient. It's ancient. Oh my gosh.
And I'm older than you, so I must just not have been paying attention.
Yeah. It was very young. So I think I was 9, and I found this community that was like this, there's a term for it, but it's just users who provide chapters creating this shared world. And so I wrote out a chapter about my character, and I submitted it as a 9-year-old. And then I started like interacting with these adults who were writing their chapters and submitting them to this shared world. And in hindsight, like people ask me now, like, when did you start writing? And I was like, oh, I only started writing a few years ago. Like, I was snowed in and I started writing NaNoWriMo. But then I started realizing, actually, no, I've been writing much longer than that. And I don't know why, but as a precocious child, I was submitting chapters to an adult writing forum called Prodigy, pre-AOL. Very strange. So I live in fear of that actually being needed at some point.
Yeah, you knew at one point, at some day, you would be writing. So we've got another question from Trisha Arnold, and she's asking, do you feel like you took any different risks or approaches with Lies We Bury versus your last book, The Missing Sister?
Yes. The answer is yes. Hi, Trisha, one of my oldest friends. Hello, thank you for joining. I 1,000% did. Lies We Bury, I took a risk with Lies We Bury in that it deals with an idea that honestly terrifies me, the idea of like false imprisonment. I think anybody that's paying attention would be terrified by it. It's very scary content to me as a woman. I think generally women are given messages, or they're given explicit signs to be on guard, to be aware of people with poor intentions against them, and so I really allowed myself to go to a dark place when writing this story and exploring what that experience might be like, and then also bearing witness to these survivors' experiences in my researching their experiences, and then reading their books, their memoirs. It was a risk for me in that I did not want to write about something so, I guess, borderline horror. Mm-hmm. When you think about it. That wasn't really my interest, but then the more I got into the story, the more I realized this needs to be shown from this perspective, and it's an integral part of the story and how Marissa comes to be the person that she is. So it must be told. I must do this chapter. So in order to be authentic to the story, to be honest with the story, I went to that place, and it felt like a risk to me, but I'm very happy with the way that it turned out. Yeah,
that was a great question, great answer too. And someone commented earlier about the Prodigy bit. Said Prodigy, it's appropriate. And then, and I might be pronouncing his name or her name, Rami Gallant.
Hi, Rami.
Okay, Rami. Okay, cool story about the Prodigy bit too. You're a rebel. So, oh, and Rami's got a question as well. And I also read this in an interview of you that posted a few days ago, that your nickname is Martian with 2 R's. And we need to know, how did you get this nickname?
It's from my last name, Marr, and just from like Mars Attacks came out. When Mars Attacks came out, again, like a long, long time ago. It's a movie. It's a film. It's called Mars Attacks. A long time ago. And I don't know. It just kind of, it was something that was said. I don't know who started it. But then my older sister and I called ourselves Martians and then said that Mars were attacking from the city that we lived in. It's a long story, Raimi.
It's a great
long story.
Raimi,
Terrible story.
Raimi and I are on the same wavelength because as soon as I read that in the interview, I was like, I need to ask her about this nickname. This is fantastic.
Good eye, Raimi. Thank you for asking.
All right. So thanks, everybody. Continue to leave a comment. We love reading them, seeing them, but also pop at the bottom of the screen. You'll see Ask a Question. Click on that. And we'll get through as many questions as we can tonight and then answer them. Elle will answer them for you. And then later on, she will pick one of you as a random winner of a signed copy of Lies We Buried. So super cool. So keep your questions coming. Okay, so we talked about Missing Sister, of course, and Lies We Bury. Something I noticed in both the books, and I'm sure other people did as well, but you incorporate the underground into both of your books. The catacombs are featured quite a lot in The Missing Sister, which was super cool. I took my two sons and my parents, my sister came as well. We went to Paris a couple of years ago and we went down to the catacombs and what a creepy place. And so that's featured in The Missing Sister. And so I was like, okay, that's a neat place for Elle to feature in her book. And then I crack open Lies We Bury and I'm like, oh, she's gone underground again. But this time it's like these brewery undergrounds, these tunnels connecting different parts of Portland. The Shanghai Tunnels. Talk to us about, you know, undergrounds. Are they a fascination source for you? Is it a theme that just keeps popping into your head? Describe that for us.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's I'm not obsessed with underground places. I hear the question. I'll just say it. I'm not obsessed with underground places, but they do. They're very intriguing to me. I love discovering history in mundane places. I used to live in France, so I've done a fair amount of traveling, and I just went. It's always struck me how in Europe, you know, you'll just be walking down the street and there will be a plaque near you that will say there was a battle that was fought here in this very corner, or this person was born here in 1592, and it's always been very intriguing to me and kind of exotic as an American that, you know, growing up on the West Coast, where, you know, modern American history didn't begin until more recently. So it's strange to me that there could be tunnels underneath, you know, the Louvre in Paris. There could be tunnels underneath like a bakery in Paris. And likewise, there are tunnels beneath present day Portland, Oregon that I had no idea existed. Until I went down into them a few years ago with my family. So really it comes down to a fascination with what could have come before us and what lies beneath us.
I love that. And also what a crazy and perfect setting if you're going to write psych fiction, if you're going to write suspense, for a way for people to either sneak from one location to another and be undetected, for her to also go down there and look for clues, sometimes undetected as well, to stumble across some stuff. So what a cool setting. I'll be interested to see in your next book if an underground pops up again.
I'm still writing it, so I might. I mean, it seems I caved to peer pressure, so maybe I'll add some tunnels.
Yeah, just pop it in there for me. You know, just throw in some random.
I'll see what I can do. I will.
Yeah, so there's the Shanghai Tunnels, because I had never heard of this before. This is only in Portland? Is that correct?
The Portland Underground, or the Portland Shanghai Tunnels, as they're also called, only exist in Portland. However, the concept of kidnapping drunken men and forcing to serve as sailors on cargo ships was a practice that was done up and down the West Coast, significantly in Seattle and also in the San Francisco Bay Area, and in the very northernmost part of Oregon in Astoria. However, in Portland, legend has it that that was the case, but it's not true. According to everything that we know and factual historical accounts, it's not the case. These tunnels, the Portland-Shanghai Tunnels, were used to transport goods from the waterfront of the Columbia River up to hotels and bars to keep them dry, because Portland has rain occasionally. So the intention of the tunnels were much more simple and practical. However, there was a lot of gang activity that went on in there and around the turn of the 20th century, a lot of vice and some murder that occurred as well. So even though it wasn't intended to be, to have such nefarious purposes, there was still a lot of darkness that went on in the tunnels. And I also researched that and learned a lot more about that while writing Lights We Bury.
Yeah, super cool. I'd never heard of it before. So that was something brand new to me, and probably to quite a few readers as well. Again, like, what an amazing setting for big chunks of your books. It was really cool. So, okay, so we're going to go back over to, we've got more questions coming in, and there are quite a few about your writing process. I think people are just, they're always interested in, how does an author work, and how do you tick, and how do you come up with your ideas? So we've got a question from, let's see, it doesn't have a name, but it asks, this person asks, what is your favorite part of the writing process?
I really enjoy writing. I really enjoy writing, the actual act of writing. I like having the plot and the idea and the characters kind of half formed in my head and then just going. I could write for hours if I had the opportunity. And then I also, strangely enough, I enjoy editing. From what I hear from other authors, not a lot of authors love editing. It's very arduous work. I really enjoy it because I feel like it's molding this, lumpy clay that I have created myself, and I'm getting to really fine tune it and sharpen it. For The Missing Sister, I wrote it for 3 years, and I sensed that it wasn't quite there. It needed more work, but I would get tired, maybe lazy, and I would be like, it's fine. It's fine. I'll take care of that later. But I always had to come back and take care of it. I always knew that it needed work, and editing something to make it the best that it can be really gives me satisfaction in some strange way. Georgina, don't let me speak for you. Do you like editing?
I made a face earlier. I don't know if you saw it.
I did see it.
So I am learning to enjoy it more. I think in the beginning, I was just, that, I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but our editors send us an editorial letter, right? Like, that's one of the first steps of the process. And it can be 5 pages, 7 pages, 8 pages of everything that they want to maybe change or consider. And it's quite a jolt, because, like Elle, you're saying you've been working on something for so long, and then to think, got to, fix this, fix that. That's tough. But yeah, after having several books under my belt now, I've got another one publishing later this year. I'm definitely at that point of the pressure getting that draft out, right? It's starting to build up, I think, as we get further along in our careers. So I'm almost now looking forward to getting that draft done. It's like, whew, because then you're right. When the editing part comes, yes, it's an ordeal. You've got this 6 or 7 page editorial letter to work from, but you're able to you've got something to work from at least. There's not like this blank page staring at you, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Really quick question for you. Am I blurry right now?
No.
Oh, great. Okay.
No. Other people comment if you think Elle is blurry, but I think you look beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That's the real question I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah, you look beautiful. No blurriness. Okay, so Melissa asks, Rami says, no, she's not blurry. All right.
Oh, thank you, Rami.
Oh, and Two River says you're great.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. So, okay, so Melissa says, do you find yourself more drawn to writing characters that you would want to be friends with in real life, or ones that you wouldn't necessarily want to be friends with?
I've never been asked this before. That's a great question. Thank you, Melissa. I write characters that I think I see. So none of my characters are based on real people. There's a quote, and one day I will find out who actually said this. There's a quote All my characters are based on everyone I've ever known. And that's how I feel about my characters. I write characters that I think that I see, which is to say complex, evolving, crabby, euphoric, optimistic people. I try to write the whole experience and the whole experience that someone might be experiencing in these extremely stressful situations that I throw my characters into. So I don't like the phrase an unlikable character or unlikable female protagonists. I think that's not fair to people that are just having a terrible day or experiencing PTSD or, are experiencing being lost in the catacombs in Paris. Like, no one's going to be a chip or anything in those circumstances. So I try to write characters that are realistic given those situations. And then also I try to write diverse characters that resemble people that I see in my daily life that are, ethnically and culturally diverse. As an American, I, meet all different kinds of people who don't look like me. And then I also didn't grow up with a lot of characters that did look like me. That was a mouthful, but I didn't grow up with mixed race characters in books and very few Asian characters in film or TV, let alone in books. I grew up with Maxine Hong Kingston and Amy Tan in books, both of whom are amazing, but the pool was very limited. So I also strive to draw an accurate representation of my American experience, and then also to write mixed race characters and Asian characters that are doing all kinds of stuff in extremely unusual circumstances, because I think, it's time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you talked about that, because that's definitely something I wanted to ask you, and something that I, being half Chinese myself, both my children are quarter Chinese, and you're right, we don't see a lot of our culture represented in different books. And, I think everybody can see with the poster behind you and then your book cover, this was a conscious decision on your part, wasn't it? That you talked to your editor and you really wanted to make sure that she was represented well. So. Absolutely.
And I have to credit Thomas & Mercer, my publisher. They were 100% on board. They wanted an accurate representation of Marissa on the book cover. And it was important to me, especially, that we had ideally a half Chinese, half white model, which is my ethnic makeup. And we were able to find one. I think she's perfect, of course. But I'm very grateful that my publisher saw the importance of that, a visual representation, not just the content of my books, but also that the outside reflected the inside of the books as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And because Missing Sister, you got the same thing, right? Was she full Chinese or was she half Chinese? I'm trying to remember.
Also half Chinese.
Also half Chinese, yeah. So with your next book, because that's definitely a question several people have asked about your next book, describe the next book for us, please. And then do you also feature an Asian character in this storyline?
Yes. Sorry, I was just thinking, in Lies We Bury, I actually have a whole bunch of different diverse characters in Lies We Bury. And one of my favorites is an Asian male bartender / actor who is just trying to make it. And I just love, he reminds me of so many people that I've met who are actors / bartenders. But I don't always see Asian male bartenders / actors. So I love him. Yeah. You'll see him in Lies We Bury if you do read it. But for my third book, it is titled Strangers We Know and is coming out May 2022. Very excited about it. It is an Own Voices story, and it's about a woman who takes a genetics test. And let me back up. It's about an adopted woman who takes a genetics test to learn more about her medical history, because, of course, she didn't grow up without knowledge. And then she learns more than she bargained for. The FBI contacts her to tell her that she is related to a serial killer, and would she please assist their investigation by learning more about her relative. So that's the essential elevator pitch. It's Own Voices for me in a couple of different ways, and that this character is also half Chinese, half white. And 100% American. She grew up in the Bay, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's also loosely, very loosely inspired by my experience of meeting my own biological family. I'm not adopted, but my mother is. And so we went and met our biological family in person after completing DNA testing ourselves. So I definitely took some very, again, loose inspiration from my experiences and tried to, I'm trying to imbue my book with that currently. I'm turning in my draft to my editor next week, but I'm very excited about it.
And that storyline, Elle, I mean, you did an interview with, was it Claire McIntosh, and you were describing Strangers We Bury, correct? That's the name.
Strangers We Know.
Oh, Strangers We Know. I'm sorry. I'm combining Lies We Bury.
It's right there.
Strangers We Know. And you were describing the book concept to her, and she said, she goes, I'm so jealous. And I thought the same thing. I was like, I am so jealous. The idea of her trying to figure out if she's related to this serial killer. How does she track this person down? Does she want to track this person down? What a cool idea. So when is this book slated to come out?
It is slated to come out in May 2022. And also, let me just say, I was also inspired by the Golden State Killer. He was identified, Joseph James D'Angelo, in 2018, actually in Sacramento, where I grew up. He was identified after being on the lam for like 20 years, I think, and wreaking havoc and terrifying so many different communities. But he was tracked down with the assistance of genetics testing. And so this is definitely also inspired by true crime and also personal parts of my life. It's a very compelling idea. Like, once you submit these genetics, your saliva to genetics testing companies, what happens to that data? Where does it go? And the fact is, the government has, if you accept to provide your information to the government has access to some certain of this information. I won't speak for all companies, I can't. But I found that to be a really interesting idea back in 2018 when that news first broke about the Golden State Killer. And then I was like, I have to write this book. And then I was editing The Missing Sister, and then I had to write Lies We Bury. And so now finally, 3 years on, I have a clear desk and I was able to write this story. But it's been fermenting in my head for so long. And it's not the only one either. There have been a lot of other great stories relating to DNA testing that have been published since then. Mm-hmm. Fiction stories, of course. But I'm excited to tell this particular story from my perspective. Hi, Christine. Two Rivers book owner. We're on mute.
Oh, are we already coming up on the hour? Wow. I didn't realize.
Oh, wow.
Yes. This has been fabulous and creepy and
thank you.
Crazy. Yeah, I'm so excited for the next book. Thrillers are not my necessarily genre.
That's fair.
But I don't know if you know the author Renee Denfield. She wrote a book called Child Finder. Also very creepy. Missing children, serial killers. It's so scary. Great reading, though.
Oh, yes.
We really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I did put a link in the chat where you can buy the book from Two Rivers Bookstore. And any last things we want to say?
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Please, if you haven't bought Lies We Bury, if you are considering it, please support Two Rivers Bookstore. They are amazing, an amazing local bookstore in Portland, Oregon. I'm so grateful that they agreed to host me this evening, and equally grateful and indebted to Georgina Cross, an amazing suspense author herself. Thank you so much for chatting with me this evening and asking such amazing questions. And to everyone in the chat who also asked questions, thank you. And I will be randomly selecting a winner from those who ask questions later on.
Yay. And we have signed copies at the shop, so give us a call or shop online. Thanks,
yes.
everyone. And everyone have a good night.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.